Two, record. Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Mastering Midlife, How to Thrive When the World Asks the Most of You. I am your host, Mark Silverman. Today, I have my new friend, Omar Pinto, on the show. Omar is a life transformational coach. He's an addiction and recovery specialist. He leads the Recovery Revolution community and is the host of the Recovery Revolution podcast. Omar, thanks for being on the show.
Mark, what a wonderful introduction. Thank you so much for having me. I am pumped to get started.
I know, because we did your show last week, so we're doing my show this week, and you promised to get me back for all the for all the shenanigans that I pulled on your show. So the reason I asked Omar to be on the show is because so many of the people I deal with either are dealing with addictions themselves or have loved ones who are dealing with addictions, and they don't know what to do with that. When we started talking, I had my own family member who I was working with, and we were having a conversation about what happens when AA or NA or the 12-step programs don't work. Where do they go? And I was pointed in your direction.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, yeah, that's exactly what they do. Some of them actually come in this direction.
So talk about your direction. Tell me how'd you get into this particular line of work?
Well, what happened with me was that I celebrated 16 years clean and sober last month. So May 26th, I celebrated 16 years.
Woohoo!
Sobriety. Thank you. And what happened is that I had started in the 12-step fellowship. I started in Narcotics Anonymous. And to this day, I will still tell anyone who is struggling, anyone who has trouble with addiction or family members who have addiction, they go, what do I do? Where do I go? I would always recommend them check out the 12-step fellowship. For what reason? A few reasons. Number one, it's tried and true over many, many years. And also the fact that it's free. So it's this free membership that you can join. It's got a 12-step program. It's already good to go. It's plug and play. And if you can, adopt the principles, right? If you can get behind, the structure, then it's going to work, because it truly did. It saved my life. The first 5 years in recovery were the lifesaver for me. What I find, and the reason why I made the shift into personal development and coaching, was because there was an element that was missing from the 12 steps. And one is it's flexibility. It's really understanding what's going on in the minds of someone who is struggling with addiction. Because for many of us, the reason why we drink, the reason why we do drugs is because we're soothing something. There's something that happened to me in my childhood, something that happened to me in my teens that affected my life. A root cause issue was formed, a main event, a first event. And somewhere along the lines, I started drinking or doing drugs, and all of a sudden the pain was gone. The emotional distress was gone. I felt at ease. I felt ease and comfort. I felt comfortable in my own skin, really. And so when you come into 12 steps, what they effectively do is they teach you how to avoid using drugs and alcohol. They create this structure for you so you learn not to drink and use, which also which puts you in a place where for the rest of your life, you're going to have to go to 12-step meetings. You're going to have to be involved in 12-step recovery to maintain your recovery. That's really the premise of it. Once you completed the steps, they tell you, well, now you just have to keep coming back, right? So what happens when you get triggered? What happens when the emotional distress that happened prior to you starting drinking and using gets triggered and you just have an inability to cope? And that's when I got into coaching. I got into NLP. I hired an NLP coach, and I recognized that I still had emotional baggage that I had to clear up. And once I did, I fell in love with the process. That's what I fell in love with, the actual coaching process. I loved working one-on-one with my coach. It was super fast. We had it within 9 sessions. I decided I was going to launch my coaching practice. I was empowered. Right. We were able to kind of get to a place where I recognized that the only person holding me back was me. And I said, this is what I'm going to do. And this is what I'm going to help people do, is to uncover the things that are preventing them from being great, from finding their greatness.
It's interesting. I was in a 12-step program, and was also striving to be successful. And one of the old timers says, "I've never seen anybody stay sober and be successful. You have to choose." And I was like, "Well, I'm gonna show you differently." But so I want to reiterate that what you said is we're not advocating or even bashing in any way, shape, or form the 12-step program.
No.
We both hold it in unhallowed ground.
Yes.
Saved both our lives. I celebrate 30 years this year.
Woo!
What we're saying is,
Yes.
and we'll call it one day at a time, because I
Mhm.
did 5 minutes after my partner walked out of the house. Oh, on your podcast, we talked about my addiction to Ben and Jerry's fish fruit ice cream and how there was a pint
Yes.
of Ben and Jerry's in my freezer. Well, 5 minutes after my partner went out on Friday night to go dog sit a dog, I polished off that pint of Ben and Jerry's ice cream. So addictions do push-ups. But back to what we're talking about is this. The alcoholism is a symptom. It becomes the disease. It becomes the go-to. But once we take care of the compulsion, once we take care of what we're using to cover up what's going excuse me, going on underneath, now we have something to address. Now that's where you come in. That's where therapy comes in. That's where everything else in addition to comes in, is how do we deal with the thing that got us empty enough to want to fill that void in the first place.
Correct. Absolutely. And I love the analogy you just used, or the story about what happened to you in there, where an old timer says, "I've never seen someone get sober and become successful."
Yes. So, he said you have to choose.
And it's incredible, because becoming sober is being successful. In and of itself, getting sober is a success. And they don't celebrate that, right?
Right.
It's like, it's craziness. And that's what we're talking about. I mean, what Mark and I are talking about is that there is a mindset in there. There is a limiting belief mindset within the program to keep people small. And we were not designed to be small. We were all designed to be great and shine bright and help others. Right? That's what we were put on this earth to do.
So, one thing I know is people who have tried 12-step programs and have not been able to maintain any semblance of sobriety also come to you.
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead.
Why do they, why do they come to you?
Again, the ones that get stuck and are unable to connect in the 12 steps, the main thing is the idea of the spiritual component. There is that spiritual component, and there's the structure of it and the rigidity, right? The antiquated language, right? So people come to me, right, that, oh, wait a minute. The question was people that aren't in sobriety?
The people who have had trouble maintaining a level of sobriety.
And then
often find some help with you.
Yes. No, relapse. Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's always the same thing. I just had a brand new client today that had a coach and also had a therapist. And she was like, well, I went to both, but it felt as though I just kind of spilled my guts, right? I just kind of just dumped it all out there and got, okay, all right. And how do you feel about that? And just really didn't get feedback. I'd really like to get a little bit of feedback on what's going on with me. And, the way I see coaching is there's some direction in there. I just feel like there's some direction. I can't even help myself. When I'm coaching, it's just back and forth. We're going back into it. And I feel like I'm a for example, football coach on the sidelines. I'm like, here you go. All right. We already discussed it. This is the play you're going to run. Okay. You're going to run this play. You're going to go, you're going to run 5, you're going to take 10 steps and you're going to turn right. Right. And then you're going to tell me how that worked out for you. Right. And then we're going to work on it. And what happened there? What happened after that? And I just feel like there's just tippy-toeing, a lot of tippy-toeing that goes on sometimes. It could be, I think, primarily if they're talking about therapy in and of itself, it's more of they have an opportunity to vent. They have an opportunity to share. They have an opportunity to kind of purge themselves of what's going on inside in a safe environment, but they're really not getting feedback. And one of the things that all of my clients, what they appreciate about me is that there's always feedback. We go back and forth. Okay.
So make that real for me, because my profession is being a coach also, but I will never touch an addict in any way, shape, or form. Not someone sober, absolutely. But they go to 12-step programs for their sobriety. They come to me to work on their goals, their visions, whatever it is they're trying, or childhood issues, whatever. But I would never even broach the subject of I'm going to help you stay sober with your addiction. What's your special sauce that you're able to enter into that no man's land and be successful?
Well, because of my experience in sobriety, my experience in recovery. So I use my experience without using 12 steps. So just to be clear, my coaching practice has nothing to do with a 12-step model. It has to do with emotional healing. So really, when you look at how I do things, it's all the same. It's just emotional healing. There's 4 major criteria that people are going through, or there's 4 main emotional criteria. There's your competence level, there's your body image, there's your identity, and there's your relationships. And in there's where the emotional scarring comes into. Relationships is mainly into unconditional love, where you feel like I will only be loved if. Identity, it could be a sexual identity, it could be a political, it could be, a personality identity. Your body, I'm too short, I'm too fat, I'm too thin. And competence, I should be smarter, I should be a better piano player, I should be a better student, I should be a better son, I should be a better wife. So in there, I'll ask I'll say, of those 4 particular things, which is the thing that you connect with the most? What would you feel is the thing that immediately, when I mention those 4 items, what is it that you think of immediately? And then without a doubt, every single time they're like, oh, it's competence. Oh, and I remember this. There was this time when I was like 10 years, and then boom, we're there. We're there. We're already like honing in on the root cause of what had caused that trauma in the first place. So we never really touch on how to stay sober, or there is no how do you stay sober. There is, let's relieve the pressure. Let's release or create relief for the emotional distress that you're under based on this particular event. That's really how I work the process. And it could be anybody. It doesn't have to be somebody who's seeking sobriety or recovery. It could be anyone who has some sort of an inability to deal with emotional distress.
Got it. And then the funny thing is we're tiptoeing around. We're talking about alcohols and drugs, but I was just commenting on another podcast about Cal Newport and the digital addiction, digital minimalism, and how it's all well and good for him to. And I love his books. But it's all well and good for him to write books about deep work and getting rid of distractions and all that. But the question remains: what do you do with the white space, with the green pastures that you create when you get rid of all these the red dots and on your iPhone, and you actually are sitting there with yourself, with your own thoughts, with your own feelings? And our nervous systems are all attuned to being outraged by the news, connected to everybody on 3 different messenger apps. And to have that white space is nerve-wracking for a lot of people, and they haven't gotten their nervous system accustomed to just being in relationship. So when we talk about alcohols and drugs, we're talking about all kinds of addictions of keeping us from being alone with ourselves.
Yeah,
whatever that demon was from childhood that you're talking about.
Absolutely. It's we're just used to being overly stimulated right now. There's if you don't want to ever have that white space that you're talking about, you never have to have it.
No.
Ever. From the moment you get up to the moment you go to sleep, you can have that time, that space filled with some sort of a distraction. The phone's there for you. Netflix is there for you. Ben & Jerry's is there for you. Shopping is there for you. Amazon's there for you. We're all there to prevent you from thinking about anything.
Yeah, it's interesting. When you and I were talking before, this family member that's been having trouble staying sober. This time I really feel hopeful, because what he said was, I've been sober for long periods of time. but I've never been happy. I've never been free. And this time, I really want to be careful. I want to do the work so that while I'm sober, I can actually be free. I actually can like deal with the crap that has made me go back to it over and over again. So I think that's what you're saying.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't know if you've had this experience with your own clients, but so many of my clients just battle with this guilt and shame and obligation, but mainly it's this tremendous amount of guilt about everything that they do. When I'm not soothing myself with something, and I'm forced to think about where I'm at or making a decision that's good for me. I've even had this example where they're these overachievers. They're just constantly, it's what's the next thing? It's what's the next thing? It's what's the next thing? So I accomplished this thing. What's the next thing? I said, when was the last time you took a massage? Oh God, it's been forever and I just don't have the time. And I go, is it that you don't have the time, or can you describe to me what it's like when you get a massage? Oh, well, it's kind of uncomfortable and I'm just thinking all the time. So tell me what it is that you're thinking about. Oh, well, it's most of the time it's just all the stuff I have to do and blah, 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 blah. I said, could it be maybe that you're feeling a little guilty? Oh, yes, that's what it is. And there's this, they're punishing themselves. Like, you're not done punishing yourself yet for all the shit. I don't know if you can cuss on here, but
yes, I just got a text from a former guest to apologize for saying a far nastier word than that.
All right, I'll keep it kosher, right? Crap, right? So there's all these things that I still haven't resolved in my life. In other words, I haven't found a way to forgive myself. I haven't found a way to find that space where I say, wow, this thing that happened to me, what an incredible learning opportunity this was, right? This made me a better husband. This made me a better son. This made me a better something, right? Instead, every time they take a moment for themselves, this overwhelming feeling of guilt just comes over them, and they don't even recognize what that is. They're just uncomfortable with the idea of being somewhere and allowing someone to either spoil them or pamper them or take some time for themselves. I should be doing something. And I'm sure that your listeners out there can relate to that little thought in your head that says, oh man, I should be doing this. I should be doing that. That guilting word that should be stricken from everyone's language.
Right. Steve Chandler calls the to-do list the should have been done yesterday list.
Yes.
Right. It's funny when you talk about very few of us have been able to forgive ourselves. For me, the thought of forgiving myself meant that I was letting myself off the hook for something that I really should pay for. The thought of forgiving, if I forgave myself, what would motivate me to work harder to be the model citizen that I've been trying to be, right? What's going to motivate me if I don't beat myself up?
Absolutely. That's the fear. You don't even, the way that you put that contextually for your listeners to hear is just that, right? If I stop for a moment, right, I'm going to lose everything, right? If I don't continue to work at this pace, if I don't continue to push myself, if I don't continue whatever, then there's that dual aspect of it that, number one, I'm going to lose what I have. And then the other part of it, I haven't earned it yet. I don't deserve to just enjoy it or relax. So it's this combination of negative emotions, this cocktail that ultimately you have to soothe it somewhere. If you can't give yourself a break, eventually your body will find a way to soothe itself. And in many cases, it's an unhealthy way.
Soothe itself or break down.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, a lot of times I've said, hey, listen, man, easy does it with like alcohol, man, it ruined my life. I go, easy does it. A lot of times what the alcohol did was allow you to put the brakes on. You have not been able to put the brakes on ever. You cannot sustain this level, this performance level continuously for the rest of your life. There has to be moments where you take care of yourself. You have to drink enough water. You have to get enough sleep. You have to create some sort of a ritual for yourself that allows you to heal and to rejuvenate. Otherwise, you just get up in the morning like the house is on fire. You go all day long, right? Until you can't go on any further, and then you crash. And that's just like every day you come on your computer, and instead of doing the shutdown process, you just press the power button, shut it down and shut it back on. A hard stop, right? It's basically what it is.
You touched on the whole premise of this podcast and basically my coaching practice is that the drives and the motivations that drove us to success, drove us, even if it drove us to the ground in our 20s and 30s, start to shift, start to crack in our 40s and 50s.
Yes.
In other words, if we did drive ourselves to success because of whatever we're running away from or running towards, it's unsustainable. I'm never going to be poor again. I'm going to prove that I'm worthy. I'm dyslexic and nobody's ever going to see that stopped me. It becomes unsustainable because it's driving you to, and you can never stop because you're always behind the eight ball. You're always going to be caught.
Absolutely. And the thing is that for most, and I'm sure you've had this experience, they just don't know what that is. Once you kind of like lay it out for them, right? And they go, oh man, that's what I'm doing. I'm literally running away from this point. There's an inflection point where I'm never going to be here again. And I asked that question too in my podcast interview. Where was that moment, that aha moment, right? Or that burning boat moment where you decided not one more day, not one more hour, not one more minute. I will never live like this again. And a lot of us are running away from that moment. And so you get success, right? And you're like, oh, I'm doing it. It's happening, right? I'm never going to be like that again. And then you start sacrificing everything else to maintain that distance. Or like how much of a distance can I create? How much of a gap can I create between now and then? So I never go back to that.
What was that moment for you?
That moment for me, there was a few. One was, oh no, I'm not going to go that one because I always tell that story, but I will tell you the one where I became a coach.
Okay.
I was working in the gambling business. So when I moved to Costa Rica, I came here to open up by the way, folks, I live in Costa Rica. I've been here for 20 years. So I moved here in 1999 to open up an online casino and sports book. And that's when I first discovered cocaine. I'd never done cocaine until I moved to Costa Rica. So that's where it kind of completely derailed me, right? So 4 years after I moved here, I lost my marriage, I lost my wife, I lost my business, I almost died a few times, right? And then I got sober. 10 years into my sobriety, I was still working in the gaming business because in Costa Rica, for me to make the kind of money that I was making there and earn it here was impossible. So that was a limiting belief that I'd created. So my story was, since I live in Costa Rica and since I can't put anything legitimate on my resume, then the only thing that I can do is work in a gambling casino. That's called a limiting belief system. And that was my mindset. And then what happened was I had left the company that I was with to open up another company. And it was just a complete disaster. Starting this new casino was just so much more of an undertaking than I was ready for. And I started to break down, right? I had none of these. I was not a coach, right? I didn't have any tools whatsoever. All I had was my sobriety. I had the meetings, right? I had the 12 steps, and I was going to tons and tons of meetings. Nothing was working. I mean, I did not pick up. I did not drink or use drugs. But let me tell you something. It crossed my mind. Like my adrenal glands were shot, my hormones, I was retaining all kinds of water. I was like a puffer fish. Yeah, I was just a complete disaster. My wife was worried sick. We'd recently, I was at the time, let's see, we've been together for 6 years. So about, I would say 2 to 3 years in, I am working 6 days a week, 10 hours a day plus. And I am just in emotional distress. And she's worried about me, right? So she's taking me to doctors, hormone specialists. Can you check this? Can you check that? Can you check this? We went to this other doctor and they said he's fine on paper and then there's something wrong with him, right? And so I went in one day and one of the partners sends me this voice text message. Just I won't repeat it because, like I said, there'll be a lot of curse words.
You can say whatever words you want on this podcast.
Okay, all right. He's like, it's something to the tune of, "You motherfucker, I told you this shit. This is fucking wait till I get back to the office." And he's screaming at me on this little app. And I just remember I'm sitting in my desk in my office. I'm listening to this text, and then I replay it again. And I have two thoughts. You either get up, walk out, and never come back, or when he comes back, you beat him to death with a chair. Those are your two options. That was the voice in my head. You have two options. You beat him to death with a chair, right? And I said, okay. I grabbed all of my stuff. I didn't say anything to my crew. I literally had nothing left, Mark. I had nothing left, man. I just grabbed my keys, got in my car, drove home, and hid in my house, right? And my wife happened to be out of town at the time. It was crazy. She was out of town with her sisters. I think she was in New York or something. And I said, I don't care. I'm not going back, right? Like I almost felt like, I was a kid with my thumb in my mouth, and I was just like, I just went home, and all of a sudden the phone starts blowing up. Hey, I've got this thing. Hey, where are you at? Blah, 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 blah. And I shut down my phone. And I just said, you know what? I'm just going to disconnect here, man. And in that time frame, I did not have it in me to go back. I had no fight left in me. Like once I'd left, all the adrenaline came down. And I said, that's it. I'm done. And when my wife came back, she said, okay, what does this mean? What does this mean? I said, well, I'm not coming back. I'm not going back. She goes, I'll tell you what, we'll get through this. You can just walk out of your job. And at the time, we were making exactly the same amount of money. So it was like half our income was about to disappear. She's like, you have to promise that you're never going to go back. You have to figure it out, whatever that is. But you, right here, right now, the only way I'll support you is because she hated it. And I said, I'm done. And I never looked back. It was hard because trust me, that next year was like roller coaster of I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. Try this, try that, throw this, throw that, get against the wall. But one thing was for sure, I'm never going to go back to gambling. And I never did. That's been 3 years now.
Nice. So what's the gift from that?
The gift from that was that what I learned in that moment was that everything that I thought I knew about me was wrong. Everything that I thought about who I was and what I was good at and what my capabilities were absolutely, completely wrong. I was under the impression that I was incapable of having a regular job, of being part of doing something that didn't require some sort of like seediness. I mean, I was in the casino business for 15 years. And prior to that, I was a mortgage broker. I mean, for those of you that know the mortgage business, it's shady. I'll leave it at that, right? So there was always some sort of shady element to my lifestyle because I did not believe in myself. And so what happened was, long story short, I had already launched the podcast. I was 2 years, now 2.5 years into the podcast. I had an interview with a guy. He is a friend. He is a mentor. His name is Tony Grebmeyer. And Tony Grebmeyer, his podcast is the Be Fulfilled podcast. Somebody reached out from his company and said, hey, we'd love to have him on your show because he's got like 9 years sober and he's an entrepreneur. He's got all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Love to interview him. So I get him on the show and he's telling me his story and he's telling me about his business. As soon as he got done, I said, Tony, man, will you help me? He's like, yeah, sure, man. What do you need? I go, I'm lost, man. I quit my job 6 months ago. I have no idea what I'm going to do. I've been trying to figure it out for 6 months. I have no idea. He says, have you ever had a coach? I go, no. Have you ever been part of a mastermind group? I said, no. He's like, well, the only suggestion I can give you is you need to invest in yourself. You need to figure that one out.
Mm.
And I was like, 6 months, no job, broke. And I'm like, dude, but I don't have a job. He's like, I'm going to tell you this right now. You need to figure that one out because that's what's going to change your life. Right. And I went to my wife and I said, okay, honey, I was on this podcast call, right? I was on this call. This guy's a multimillionaire. I asked him for help. This is what he says. She says, let's do it. Let's do something.
Right, yeah, let's something's got to change.
Something's got to change.
Throw a little money at it. It's okay.
She goes, I'm all about personal development. I'm constantly taking courses, right? Let's go. Let's do it. Find one and let's start. See, the thing is she already has and had experience with coaching and getting certified and growing in personal development, and I hadn't. So she knew the power of it. I just had the 12 steps, and I was drowning, man. I was drowning in self-pity and self-loathing and this that's enough. Self-pity and self-loathing.
Yeah, that's a whole other story. So what is the Recovery Revolution community?
So the Recovery Revolution community was when I started coaching, the transformation with me, the life-changing transformation happened within about 6 months of me joining a mastermind and hiring a coach. 6 months. My life had never changed so fast. My mindset hadn't changed so fast. And I said, that's it, man. I am going a whole new direction. I can do this. I remember being coached and being in a mastermind and then watching somebody lead a mastermind. I'm like, I can do this. This is me. So, but I needed to be able to say that. I had never said that about myself ever. And I said, I'm going to launch I'm going to launch my coaching practice, and I'm also going to take the podcast in another direction. It was called the Share Podcast. Sharing Helps Addicts in Recovery. So it's spelled SHAIR. And it was very niched, right? Sharing helps addicts in recovery. That's it, right? And I was like, no, man, I don't want to focus here anymore, right? And I said, you know what? I want to revolutionize the way people look, feel, talk about recovery. I want them to feel the way I feel, excited about the future, excited about change. Like there's no wrong way to do personal development except not doing it. Get a coach. If that doesn't coach, hire a different coach. Join a mastermind, then join another mastermind, right? Read this book, then read that book, right? Listen to this podcast. There's just so much information out there. And I said, this is where I want to take people. So when I get people on the call now, it's a combination of personal development, coaching questions, and their recovery journey kind of mixed together. And my listeners have just been loving it. Even the ones that didn't like it in the beginning because they were like, oh my God, like how can you combine anything with recovery, right? I was like, oh, anyway. And I'll get these messages now where they're like, dude, you know what? It took me a while to kind of get used to your podcast. They still listened. I mean, that's pretty awesome.
People want healing, and people don't want to be alone. So I will put the links to your website, to the podcast, and to the community in the show notes, so that people who want to do more research on you and find out about you can find you.
Thank you. The easiest way is just omarpinto.com. It's got everything. My podcast, it got me, it's got my coaching, it's got my contact. omarpinto.com.
Okay. Well, it makes it really easy for me to put the links in the show notes. Omar, thank you for sharing your wisdom, your gritty tale to self-actualization. And I just appreciate you. I could talk to you for hours.
Yes. And we have. We
actually have. My podcasts are supposed to be 20 minutes. Yeah. Good job on that one. Don't worry about it. All right, man.
Love you, Mark.
So much. Thank you for all the people that you help. And thank you for sharing with my audience. To everybody else, I love you and have a great rest of the day.
Love you, brother.